This is Ralph Rensler, director of the Smithsonian Bicentennial Folklife Festival. If you enjoyed the festival, you'll be interested in this invitation.
Ladies and gentlemen, an opportunity like this cannot be taken for granted.
This evening, we are going to be beating our hearts out for you all, so I want to see people enjoying themselves. So get up and feel the music and do something about it, okay?
This event is a right of cultural democracy.
We have many, many partners, you included. I encourage you to stand alongside with us as we travel this journey year after year.
Welcome to the 2022 Smithsonian Folklife Festival. For over 50 years, the festival has convened people on the National Mall to explore the power of culture and creativity in our lives today. This year, we feature artists and partners from the United Arab Emirates and Earth Optimism, a global conservation movement. The Smithsonian Folklife Festival is produced by the Center for Folklife and Cultural Heritage in partnership with the National Park Service. The festival strives to maintain an accessible and inclusive environment for visitors of all abilities. If you are in need of accessible seating options or assistive listening during this presentation, please see our venue manager volunteer. The Earth Optimism by Folklife sponsoring partners include Ford Motor Company, HHMI Tangled Bank Studios, Roger W. Sant, the Honorable Doris Matsui, and United Airlines. Additional support is provided by the Asian Pacific Initiative Pool, Anela Kaole Foundation, Ann Kaiser and Doug Lapp, Rewild, Sakaruna Foundation, and the Shared Earth Foundation. Festival hours are 11 a.m. to 5 p.m. with special evening events starting at 6:30 p.m. For the most up-to-date schedule information, please visit our website at festival.si.edu or follow us on social media. Please make sure to visit the festival marketplace on the other side of the castle to support artisans from around the world, and please visit one of our concession stands for a drink or snack. And now it is my pleasure to introduce the session that you're here for today, Partnering for Solutions. Our moderator is Bill Weir, climate correspondent for CNN. He's joining us virtually. Hey, Bill.
Hello.
We also have Karissa Kruse, President, Sonoma County Winegrowers. Steve Dutton, Sonoma County Farmer, Sonoma County Winegrowers. We also have Juan Lavista Ferres, Chief Scientist and Lab Director, Microsoft AI for Good Research Lab. And then we have Cynthia Williams, Global Director of Sustainability, Homologation and Compliance for Ford Motor Company. And joining Bill virtually on screen is Peter Bick, Professor of Practice, Director at ASU and Carbon Nation. Bill, take it away.
Thank you so much. Greetings, folks who like folk life. Greetings, Earth optimists. It's a big day, as you probably know, in climate news based on what happened at a building not far from where you are on the National Mall. The Supreme Court made a decision I think a lot of folks in this space are still sort of reeling with and dealing with. But as I mentioned at an earlier panel today, I cover this beach, so I drink from a fire hose of sort of peer-reviewed doom. And what helps me is to follow the advice of Mr. Rogers and look for the helpers. Look for people who are actively engaged in solutions, who are passionate about protecting our little blue marble in space, which feels more like a life raft as we go day by day. And it takes partnerships. And that's why I'm so enthused to connect with you folks here today. If you're watching on YouTube, I hope you'll comment and share. If you're there in person, I hope you have a question loaded up for our panelists in a few minutes. We'll open it up for that. But in the meantime, let me get it right over to our good folks who are there. So we'll start with the folks on the stage. Steve, introduce yourself and tell us what you do.
I'm Steve Dutton. I'm a fifth-generation Sonoma County farmer. My brother and I worked together and farmed 1,200 acres of certified sustainable wine grapes. and 200 acres of certified organic apples in Sonoma County.
Very cool. So I was remiss in saying that the partnerships here, we're going to cover, regenerative agriculture, vintners, scientists, communicators, as well as auto company executives here, because this problem takes obviously all the help it can get. So good to meet you virtually, Steve. Karissa, you work with Steve. Tell us about yourself. What's a day in your life?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Karissa Kruse. I run the Sonoma County Winegrowers. I work on behalf of the 1,800 grape growers in Sonoma County, and it's really exciting to be here because I'm looking at the sign that says Earth Optimism, and I know it's often easy to be doom and gloom when we think about what major task we have, but what I say gives me so much hope is that we can really work together and do local solutions with partners that will help us really move forward in terms of doing better, looking at regenerative agriculture and doing what we can to both mitigate and adapt to an ever-changing, faster climate world that we're all facing. So excited to be here and talk. And Steve is one of our local farmers who's really been leading the charge for both sustainable and regenerative agriculture.
Fantastic. I can't wait to dig into that more with you. But let's bring in our other remote guest, Peter Bick, who's vacationing. I'm on vacation up in the Catskills with my little boy. And Peter's taking his family around France and Italy. So he wins. Yeah. Hello, Peter. Introduce yourself. Tell folks what you do.
Sure. I'm a filmmaker, and I teach at Arizona State University. I teach documentary filmmaking. About 11 years ago, I put out a film called Carbonation, which was about solutions to climate change, and was not a bitch and moan film, definitely an Earth optimist type of movie. And in the research for that film and all the things I was learning around that time, I was learning that the soils, the way we treat our soils, is both a huge problem for the planet and also a huge potential solution. And the folks who were building soils, who were drawing down as much carbon as possible that I was finding were folks who were grazing their animals in a way that replicated the way bison roamed the Great Plains back when it built 15-foot deep topsoils. And so these farmers were giving their farms basically the same kind of heavy hit with the animals and then a long rest period. They're just breaking their farm into little paddocks. But there was no science. And because I'd just come out to ASU, I helped put together a science team. And so we've just spent the last 10 years designing, fundraising, and then completing the research to see whether this type of grazing that we call adaptive multi-paddock grazing is actually more beneficial for the land and for the farmer than conventional continuous grazing. And the answer is yes, and yes.
Yes and yes. Absolute perfect way to tee up a conversation. Let's go over to Juan. Juan, please tell us about yourself.
So I'm Juan Lavista, and I'm the Chief Data Scientist at Microsoft AI for Good Research Lab. And part of the work we do is we partner with organizations around the world, whether in the medical space, in the EFO health space, or organizations like the Smithsonian, or organizations that work to try to measure biodiversity. My job is to provide the AI capabilities for these to partner with these research scientists to help them do their job. That's basically what we do. And even though these problems are extremely different, from working on pancreatic cancer here in partnership with Johns Hopkins University, and finding elephants or cows in Kenya, even though these problems are extremely different from a problem perspective, from an AI or computer vision perspective, these problems are really similar. And that allows us to work and have impact in very different type of problems around the world.
Yeah, it's important to remind ourselves, I guess, these days that AI is like a knife or a flame. It can either heal or maim, depending on who's holding it. It's a tool. And man, if we could harness the power to advance a healthier world, wouldn't that be amazing? So can't wait. And then finally, Cynthia from the Ford Motor Company. Hello.
Hello, everyone. How are you? I'm Cynthia Williams. I lead the global sustainability, homologation, and compliance team at Ford. Part of my role is to bring sustainable solutions to help our partners bring capable vehicles that not only are sustainable, but are the most capable vehicles that we build. It helps them to reduce their costs and also to bring a sustainable solution to their work that they're doing. And we're happy to be here and partner with the Sonoma wine growers as well as the Dutton Ranch.
All right. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you all for being here. And let's start with that partnership. Karissa, talk about Sonoma County wine growers. You know, what the mindset is in that part of the country about this next phase of farming, and a little bit of what Peter talked about, that farmers don't have to retrain like maybe frackers, you know, would have to. They can be allies in this fight immediately, but tell us about the state of things up there and the work you're doing.
Sure. So excitingly, back in 2014, Sonoma County wine growers made a big commitment to sustainability, to be 100% certified sustainable in all our vineyards, which today seems like, of course, and obviously you would do that. But back in 2014, not a lot of, especially wine regions, were thinking about sustainable farming as sort of a path forward and the right path forward. We were so excited. It's a very holistic approach to farming and businesses and actually social sustainability. And we hit 99% certified sustainable in 2019, and really putting us on the map for being a global leader in sustainable farming, and certainly the wine region that's most sustainable in the world. And so we really shifted at that time. We couldn't, avoid, obviously, and Bill, you know this, a headline that would reference the impact of climate and how these changes were happening faster, and we needed to be quicker in our responses and really looking to do better. And as agriculture, I think we have a huge opportunity to be part of that solution, because we naturally have the ability to sequester carbon on our ranches and on our vineyards. But when we thought about the other side of climate impact, which is greenhouse gas emissions, frankly, we were a little challenged, to use a polite word, on how we were really going to be able to move the needle on that. Because, as I like to say, and we got a farmer right next to me, he'll probably nod his head here in a second, but our farmers love their trucks, right? They love their vehicles. And their trucks aren't just about getting them from place to place. They're really equipment for them. They're how they move employees around. It's how they move equipment around. It's how they literally transport grapes, and they play an integral role. And so when we had this incredible opportunity, and we're a small wine region, right? I like to say we like to roar, and we like to act big, so we try to amplify our message, but we're small, and most of our farmers are small family businesses. And so when we had the opportunity to partner with Ford Pro and Ford Motor Company to think about how we help our farmers go electric on their ranches with their vehicles, and even more importantly, really understand how their vehicles operate and efficiencies through telematics, we were so excited, because suddenly this small little wine region could have this global partner to help us find better solutions. And we've been at this partnership for about 6 months now. We have so much learning we've already done and so much ahead, and it's really, really exciting. And we're just so honored that Ford took a chance on us to help us solve this problem.
So, Steve, what does that look like? I mean, we all know that the electric Ford 150, like the waiting list is for 10 years or something, but that's a good thing. There you can see the pent up demand. But how has your practice changed? It feels, I've always had a fantasy about being a vintner, and that it feels like it's at the top of the agrarian food chain in terms of lifestyle, but I'm sure it's just as hard as growing anything else. What is it that has changed for you with these initiatives?
Well, for starters, if you really want to be a vintner, come on out, and I'll let you practice for a day or two before you decide.
Good, yeah.
But for us, right now we're using the Ford telematics. We're using that on our gas-powered vehicles, so that we're looking at that to help us with vehicle efficiency, just to learn how we use our trucks and how to service them and keep them out in the field more. So that's been a tool we've been using. We're excited that we're going to get our first e-transit here. I'm pretty sure in a week to 2 weeks, and we are. And so we're excited to get that, because the demand is huge for these vehicles. I'm hearing that we'll get our first F-150 sometime in August, and I think that So we have on our ranch, which is not a huge ranch, but we have 40 Ford vehicles on our ranch, and there is no reason why many of them over time can't be converted to an electric truck. We also have on our ranch, on top of our buildings, we have a huge solar array, and I look forward to the future when, our own solar array is charging our trucks so that we can use these vehicles throughout the day.
Very cool. Let's bring in Peter. I did a piece last year, and I went and visited this farmer who's sort of on the bleeding edge of this idea, a dairy farm, who had a big methane capture thing, and he was basically capturing the gas coming off his cow poop to fuel the tractor that he would then feed his cows with. And I said, gosh, this is obviously such a good idea. It's a closed loop. A lot of people think dairy and beef cannot be a regenerative thing. What is your experience showed you about beyond growing wine grapes? Is this scalable across the agricultural system?
Yeah, well, when we're talking about solar power, each blade is a solar panel of grass, right? And so when you have a field that is completely covered in plants, hopefully biodiverse plants, you've got an ecosystem that nature's actually using, and you're actually using nature's skills at its highest level. And so when you see fields that have soil that's exposed, it's a solar spill. It's just as dangerous as an oil spill, because when that soil is exposed, it heats up to like 140 degrees on an 80-degree day. It kills all the microbes. And it's those microbes that are in the soil that are the drivers for all the health of all the systems. I'm focused on grazing systems, so that's where I've been studying for the last 10 years. And so when we see farmers who are doing this type of grazing that builds little paddocks around their farms and lets the farm rest most of the time because they have all their animals in one herd and they're moving them sometimes just 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours a day, and then letting that land rest for 60 days or 90 days. That's how the grasslands and the grazing animals co-evolved for hundreds of thousands of years. And that's when so much photosynthesis happens, and that's when so much carbon is drawn down as a result, feeding that microbial life, which is actually building the soil. And right now, our soils are in such bad shape. You're worried about climate change. I'm worried about climate change. I'm much more worried about our soils. Our topsoil is gone in so many places and almost gone in just about every place. These farmers are building soil. The actual soil itself, half of it is dead microbes. And so the more plants you have and the more variety of plants you have, the more microbes you have, the more microbes dying, you're actually rebuilding soil. And then that's going to hold a lot more water. It's going to be a lot more resilient in drought and flood. And it's going to drive so many things that we want, which is a farmer not being in debt and killing themselves because they're in debt, and producing really nutrient-dense food, which all those microbes do naturally. And so everything we want, nature does. We've been fighting nature at industrial levels for 200 years. So guess what? We've made really cheap food, as long as you don't consider healthcare costs as part of the cost of your food. Once you put the healthcare costs in that food, very expensive food. But we've really stressed farmers, and we've stressed land. And so I came into this because I was worried about climate change. These folks are drawing down huge amounts of carbon. So if we can inspire farmers, let them know this is possible, because most farmers don't even know about this, which is just the way it is. I can't blame anybody. It's just the way it is. But we can let people know. You mentioned communication and all those things. We now have the data. We're making a big documentary about it. It's time to get the message out. Hey, farmers, you don't have to be in debt, and you can work with nature, and you can be happier about your day job and quit your off-farm job.
Right. Win, 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 win all the way around. The more I travel, the more scientists I talk to around the world, you realize that biodiversity really is the barometer of the health of life. The more varieties of insects on your land, the sounds you hear that you don't hear in a monocrop factory farm where a butterfly will die trying to cross it, is the stuff of life. But Juan, you mentioned you're using Microsoft AI to measure biodiversity. Explain that more, and how would you characterize the state of that crisis as we think about all the others on top of it?
Yeah, it's very difficult. Like, the first step for us to solve a problem is we first need to measure. And measuring not only for understanding how big is the problem, but also is key in measuring to understand if you're making progress or not. measuring some of these, for example, measuring biodiversity, even measuring carbon emissions, are usually really difficult problems to measure. And specifically in the case of carbon accounting, the problem is if you don't have reliable measures, you really cannot see if you're making a difference or not. The same thing happens if you're measuring the population of whales. If you don't know, like for example, we're working with NOAA on beluga whales. For them, it's key to understand how many beluga whales are there. Using AI technology, for example, in the case of beluga whales, these animals are big enough that using high-resolution satellite imagery, you can actually see them from space. And of course, finding a very small set of pixels in an ocean is impossible. But at that point, you can use AI algorithms that can go and actually detect the whale. And using this technology, you can actually start counting and start seeing if whatever you're doing is making progress or not. So it relates to our possibility to measure and track.
Excellent. Yeah. Speaking of whales, a little tangential, but you brought it up. I was just speaking with Sir David King in the UK, their sort of climate leading mind, and talking about we have 5% of the whales we once had, and we don't think about them as giant fertilizer pumps that would go down deep and pull all these deep ocean nutrients, and because they can't poop down there, they come back up to the surface and spread, this fertilizer for the phytoplankton, which is the bottom of the pyramid. So knowing how many we have left is hugely vital. Let me ask Cynthia, tell me about sort of the culture at Ford these days and how you came into your position. Henry Ford, of course, gave us the idea of assembly line and scale. And wow, wouldn't it be great to harness that for the good of the planet? But what is it that you're learning these days that excite you most or that concern you most?
So I've been at Ford Motor Company for 30 years. 29 of those 30 years, I've been in sustainability, environment, and safety engineering. So I've been working in this space for a very long time. And I'll tell you, it's great to see the vehicles actually hitting the roads. And so what we've been working on, and before we had our carbon neutral strategy, we had a blueprint for sustainability. So we've always been grounded in science and making sure that we were on track to meet the Paris Agreement. A couple of years back, we decided we were going to establish a carbon neutrality plan. Our goal is to be carbon neutral no later than 2050. And to do that, we're focusing on 3 areas. We're focused on vehicles, our facilities, as well as our supply chain. And vehicles being that largest piece, that's where we wanted to make sure that we were attacking and making sure that we were meeting our customer needs. So we meet with folks like folks on the Dutton ranch just to sit down and talk to them. What's the capability that you need in a vehicle, so that we're making sure that we can bring that solution to them that works. And so our goal through our Ford Pro operation is to work from end to end. So not only providing the vehicles, we also provide the finance solutions. We also provide the telematics, as Steve mentioned. And the telematics not only works with the electric vehicles, it works across their fleet. And so that they
can you explain what that is? What is telematics?
Telematics is more of a technical solution that connects the vehicle. So if you have a gasoline vehicle, similar to like what insurance companies do, we can put a dongle in your OBD2 port, your onboard diagnostics port, that can actually measure the data, measure the miles driven. So it's no guess as to when the next oil change is done. You can sit at your computer and actually see what vehicles needs to be serviced next. That saves money. That minimizes the downtime of a vehicle. When they're idling, we were just in Sonoma a couple weeks back, and some of the things that we're learning, they've saved so much money just on idle time by using electric vehicles. again, it's saving money. And
I think it was $24,000 a year if you minimize the idling time with just one of our ranch pilot farmers. So that's a big deal.
Exactly. And so that's what we want to make sure that we're doing. We want to make sure that we're showing them all of the things that they can do to minimize the cost to their business and maximize their uptime. So our goal is to work with them on that.
Yeah, the idling thing. I just read a study that, whoever figures out how to allow cement mixers to sit and spin without idling is going to make $1 billion, because that's a huge, more than a lot of the cars on the highway. It's a problem that needs a solution. But let me ask Steve and go back to, regardless of all your best practices and your good efforts, and Karissa says you've got almost 100% sustainability, you're still sort of in the bullseye of a warming planet. I learned about smoke taints covering the wildfires out there and how the smoke can affect a wine crop. How is it impacting your agriculture now, and how bullish are you on the future given the trend lines now?
Well, I mean, it's affecting us in many ways. Wine grapes we're going to start, I think, harvesting earlier and earlier every year. I could see us in the future maybe changing to different varieties of wine grapes that we grow in our area that ripen later. So that could definitely be happening. I mentioned we farmed organic apples too. We actually have one variety of apples that we're switching out of because there's not enough cold temperatures in the winter to set a crop. And so that's an issue that we're dealing with. That's happening right now. So that's, we're right. I think I mentioned I'm a 5th generation farmer. My kids work with me, so they're the 6th generation of Duttons to farm in Sonoma County. We're going to figure this out. We're just going to keep working with this and coming up with solutions and figure it out so we can continue to farm and have productive land.
Karissa, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things we've been talking a lot about, and Ford Pro sort of came along on this collaboration, is what does the farm of the future look like? What do we do? And, obviously the foundation of sustainability, we keep doing those best management practices, that's there. But what we're learning, and I think why we need the title of this, session's partnerships, and why partnerships are more important than ever, is that we're learning that for our farmers, sometimes the practices are a little bit almost challenge each other. And I'll give an example that we've spent a lot of time thinking about is, when you're looking at carbon sequestration, the thing you don't want to do is touch the soil, right? You want to really you want to plant things and let them grow, and you're going to and draw down carbon. Well, we've been in one of the worst droughts in 100+ years in California. So what's the first thing a farmer does in a drought? They're told to remove all the competition from the vine row in order to conserve water, so you literally get a crop, which if you don't have a crop, then we're out of business. Forget this whole conversation, right? So we've been talking about how do we have partners like Ford Pro and bringing more analytics to our local farmers to understand how do we connect weather data with the farming practices and give our farmers as many options to be able to literally respond as fast as possible. And we have this vision for, not only can they understand vehicle health on their dashboard in their truck or vehicle, but understand, hey, temperature hit this, it's frost protection time, temperature hit this, here's the rainfall. We need to move faster on doing these practices and having those at their fingertips, because we're going to be constantly dancing with Mother Nature. And, sometimes she steps all over our toes, and sometimes she gives us a nice little twirl. So we have to really figure out when we're getting stepped on and when we're twirling, and how we do that better. And again, partners like Ford Pro and others who have come to us and said, hey, we want to use you as a living lab. Let's figure this out. And then let us help share your message. So it's not just sitting in Sonoma County in wine grapes, but it's literally being amplified around the world for agriculture. And I think, Peter, this is a lot of what you're doing, is amplifying the message. So
I have a question, if I may. Bill?
Go for it.
Okay, so in Sonoma, you were just talking about if you remove all the other plants, your grapevines will be in control of getting every drop of water. What we're seeing on all the farms we're studying is when they have this biodiverse and very robust grass cover, forb cover, the dew in the morning is so extreme that our pants are absolutely soaked walking through And that's not a rainfall, that's just dew every morning. And I was just wondering if you guys saw that if you have cover of your soil, that you see that dew, and could that be added water on your system that you wouldn't be capturing because you don't have the live plants there if you're just removing everything but the grapevines?
Well, what we're seeing is we used to have many foggy mornings in Sonoma County during the summer.
Right.
And that dew would happen.
Right.
We're seeing less of those right now. So the water is becoming fierce, right? And there's a whole initiative in California now about groundwater and groundwater sustainability. So many of us use water out of the soil, out of a well to irrigate our vineyards. So there's competition for that water. There's how do we use less of that and still farm a crop? The other thing we're doing, at least at our ranch, is we're having huge investments in rainwater catchment ponds. So we're building ponds so we can store rainwater when water's abundant and then use it later in the summer. So we don't have to till and we don't have to do these things. So we're trying many different things to make sure that we can farm a viable crop.
Gotcha.
And I'm sure that, you school us on just the thought about drip irrigation and really controlling every drop, which if you're a cotton farmer in Arizona, that may not work if the water's too silty or not. But you've been sort of water focused for a while before this, correct? Going back probably to your grandpa.
Yeah. So, right. I was a kid and my father, we installed the first drip irrigation system. So we've been farming with drip irrigation on our vineyards for 45 years, since essentially they started coming to California. So yes, absolutely. That's all we irrigate the vineyards with is drip. The water's focused. We can get it down to where we're applying 1 to 6 gallons of vine in any day. We do a lot of watering at night, so the water's more efficient. We use it's less chance for it to evaporate during the day. So we practice all those things and make sure we focus the water where we need it. We also use, we're monitoring our soil in many of our ranches, and probably 25 of them, we have what soil monitoring for this moisture in the soil. So we're not just irrigating because we think we should, we actually know we should.
Yeah. I wish we could teleport everybody in the West, maybe in the East, to Lake Powell these days. I was just out there, and that will wake you up. When you see that the water has fallen 170 feet in these, First National banks of life that we built to sustain 40 million people, it's down to the bottom of the bathtub. And so getting that information across, letting people understand the gravity of what's happening. Peter, you talk about the strength of storytelling. That I say man-made climate change can't be fixed without man-made culture change, which starts at sort of the grassroots up, pun intended. But what has been as you teach your kids at Arizona State, what are the most effective storytelling devices on how to get this across to people for their own benefits?
Solutions. Focusing on solutions has been an enormous benefit for my students' films. More people are watching them because they're talking about solutions. They're not bitching and moaning. And personal stories, like just always finding the singular story that can become the metaphor for the bigger picture. I'm sure you know this. I'm sure you know this in your work. And so those are the two things that I found are really important. For me personally, I had a biology teacher in 10th grade, Mr. Sled, in Louisville, Kentucky, and he made us laugh during things that weren't funny, like dissecting a fetal pig. He brought humor into the story in a place where I never thought it was, but he influenced me so deeply that I'm always trying for funny, always. I'm not sure I'm actually doing it right now, but in my films, it's like, always going for a laugh, always making somebody laugh. Like here I am in France, and I actually made someone laugh with a joke I said in French last night, which I thought was a huge success. And so that to me is actually the top. Like when we're looking at our dailies, we're looking at our footage, I say to any editor that's working with me, if it's funny, you put 5 stars by that. And that to me is the most effective way, because we're talking about such a heavy subject, right? But there's a lot of life in here, and the solutions are so good. And, and for me, humor is absolutely gold when we're telling the stories.
That's the thing too. I started my career as sort of a smart-ass sportscaster who was always looking for the easy laugh. And at a certain point, I realized if I'm going to go on TV, maybe I should talk about things that matter, to the most amount of people, and taking them on the ride. The reason you buy a movie ticket, the reason you read a novel, there's a math and science to storytelling that makes that sort of recognition land in a way that burns memories into your hippocampus. Juan, I'm interested in how you see the world through a scientific lens. Like, what are we missing as storytellers that you wish you were seeing more of based on your research?
I do think there's a lot of progress in many areas. There's a huge amount of very talented and amazing researchers with great ideas. And unfortunately, I do think that we still, as a society, we still like to consume more of the pessimistic view. That is not necessarily bad. Again, like there's a lot of things for us to be pessimistic in many ways, but there are very successful stories, and sometimes we don't pay too much attention to those. From researchers that now are working in Brazil and India in solutions to diagnose leprosy. Leprosy is one of the oldest human known diseases, and they're still very predominantly in areas like Brazil and India. And these researchers are working with them very closely, like from areas like that to the researchers in NOAA, to the researchers in Smithsonian, trying to do their best to increase animals from elephants to giraffes to whales, to measuring carbon. Like, there's a lot of very successful stories and very successful researchers, and I would love people to learn about some of those, basically. So I do think we need to invest a bit more on those success stories that are working. So.
And Cynthia Williams, we're going to get to questions from you really quick, but I just want to give Cynthia a shot to talk about, we tend to divide ourselves into corporations versus activists or these sorts of things. How do you see the dialogue going to a more productive way? And what do you tell your kids about the future?
For me,
or your family members?
For me, working at Ford Motor Company, we understand that we can't do this alone. We need partners to be successful. We're looking to have our global volume to be 50% electric vehicles by 2030 timeframe. And we need all of you to be in vehicles to make that happen. So, this collaborative work, it helps us to understand what the customer needs, what the capability of the vehicles is required, so that we can deliver solutions that work for them. Without that, this transition won't happen. So we need to work together so that we can, not only, build a business that works for Ford, but also leave a better world for our children and our grandchildren as we move forward. Yeah. Ford wants to bring everybody along.
If you have a huge breakthrough in technology, you'll share it with Chevrolet?
Absolutely not. Now, mind you, the joke, my dad worked at General Motors for 30 years, so, it's all in the family.
I'm on the F-150 Lightning list myself, so I'm trying to help out as much as I can.
Yeah, you're doing your part. You're doing your part. All right, we have just a few minutes left here. Do we have anybody in the audience who wants to step up and ask a question to our amazing panel? I can't tell if anybody's jockeying for that mic or not.
You know what? Someone's heading up there right now, I think.
Okay, fantastic.
Someone headed there.
We're going to wrap this up in about 6 minutes here at 3:45.
I was about to use my mom Mexican voice and scream from there. I guess my question would be like, what made you say, I need to start thinking about sustainability? Especially when you're running a business, I don't think that's the number one thing you think about. You just think about what's going to be easier. So, but what was it that made you think this is the way to go? And this is working for us? Because it's a lot of work to change your model, right? A lot of time, money invested. So what made you say, this is where I need to go?
So I'll just mention what we did from a regional perspective, and let maybe Steve just comment on his own family farm. But from a region perspective, we're about 95% of our farmers are like small family farmers. And when we really looked ahead and said, how do we ensure, I mean, literally the DNA of our community out there is agriculture. It's in our seal of our county. And we really said, how do we ensure that there's agriculture 100 years from now in our backyard? And most of our farmers used to farm something else. They farm wine grapes today because that's a viable crop that they can afford then to keep their ranches and their farms. And so for us, it was like, if we can move the mindset, change the culture of thinking about their entire business from a sustainability lens, with that lens, that is our best hope for the next 100 years of agriculture. And so I think, on my board, I have a 22-person board of directors. They're the leaders in our community in terms of farming. And one of them is actually Steve's brother. He was part of this. And so they signed. I literally made them sign the pledge because I was like, don't put it back on me. You signed up for it, and I have your writing, I have your signature. And I think that was really, they committed, and then they led, and they said, we're gonna lead by example. And then they were able to bring the rest of the community with them. And then they start to see cost savings. They started to feel better about their practices. They had a new focus on employee housing and other things that are around kind of the social sustainability piece. So they saw the real benefit, but it took the leaders to really step up and then show and pave the way. And maybe let Steve just mention on his business specifically.
Well, so says being a multi-generational farmer, right? And so right now there's 3 generations of my family involved in our farm right now. My mother's still alive, my brother and I, and then between the two of us, we have 5 kids. So we're all there on the ranch together. So really, this started years ago for us, and we were sustainable before it became a defined thing, I believe, because everything we did and every decision I make now, and it started when the beginning of my career, because this is what my father taught me, was about how am I going to make whatever we're farming, wherever we're farming, better when I'm at the end of my career. Because if I deplete everything, if I ruin this land, what do my kids have to farm? What do my grandkids have to farm? I'm thinking about that generation as well as my own. So, or in those generations, as well as my own. So it's a big deal to us. Peter mentioned about composting. We don't farm animals, but we've been importing animal compost to our ranch for 30 plus years and spreading it over many of our acres every year and rotate around and spread it over different acres. And we're doing these things to build up our soil and make things better. It's just now defined, and Karissa's actually got us credit for doing the stuff we were doing before.
You're way ahead of your time. It is good business.
Good business.
Anybody else? One last question. I see a gentleman in a hat or a woman in a hat.
It's more of a comment. Something that you said struck a bell with me. My name's Jonathan Sedler. I'm the Vice President of the East Hawaii Outdoor Circle statewide for the state. Working in collaboration with nature, something that we have found out where we are, we have many areas that are very arid. And by planting Cook pines and Norfolk pines on our ridges, a Norfolk pine, when it reaches maturity at about 5 to 7 years, puts 35 gallons of water a day into the groundwater. So on the island of Lanai, all of the ridges of the island have been planted with these trees that grow to about 40 to 60 feet in height, and they are all pumping water daily. The other option too is in Mali, they have they're using fog net farming. The fog nets every single night gather 25, the smallest ones gather 25 gallons of water a night. So especially for you folks in Sonoma, fog net farming is something that is being missed big time because it does draw the fog in. It's the more water you get, the more it draws. So hopefully there's some ideas that help you guys and get other conversations going.
Yes.
Love it. Thank you so much. And thanks to all of you, both for participating in this and tuning in. I hope you share the YouTube link with folks in your lives and spread the message far and wide. But Karissa, Steve, Juan, Cynthia, Peter, I hope to meet you all in person one day. I hope to sip your grapes and visit your classrooms and drive an electric F-150. But in the meantime, we'll kick it back to the mall in Washington. Thanks again, everybody.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much, Bill Weir, for that excellent moderation. We appreciate it. Thank you to our panelists. Let's give another round of applause to everybody. That was fantastic. I learned a lot. All right. So there's more to come. If this intrigued you, we have a wine tasting with Dutton Wines over in the marketplace on the other side of the castle starting in 15 minutes. So you all have time to make it over there. I strongly encourage you to do that. I'd like to thank our technical staff and our volunteers again for making all of this possible. And as you exit, please remember to visit all the other Earth Optimism and UAE exhibits along the mall. And to support the concessions and the marketplace. Tomorrow is our next Earth Optimism session at 1 p.m. and it's entitled Food for All, Equity, Access, and Justice. It's going to be fantastic, so I strongly encourage you to be back with us here at 1 o'clock tomorrow. And thank you so much for joining us. If you have any questions for our panelists, they'll be down front and happy to answer your questions off the stage. Thank you so much.
Yeah, now everyone can do that.